I think there's two main points here. The first is that they've got to make sure that they are managing their time effectively. Okay, and two key principles for that in making sure that they're allocating and using their time as best they can are: one, touch each piece of paper at work only once, if they can, and two, remember the 5 Ds. The 5 Ds here, Emily: do it, defer it, dump it, delegate it, or discuss it. Okay? Now, whatever job you've got to do, one of those 5 options will apply. There are no others.
Can you just mention those again?
Okay. If you do it,
yep,
defer it, dump it, delegate it, or discuss it. Now, if you do it, if you dump it, and if you delegate it, the job is done. It is gone and should be no more. If you defer the job or discuss the job with your husband, it's not finished. And many people make the mistake of thinking that because you've discussed it, the job is done. It's not. You then have to come right back again at some point and look at the 5 Ds again and either do it, dump it, or delegate it. Now, if you do that, that work is gone and you can move on. Okay? The second point to make is that you need to try in your house, if possible, to set aside an area that is workspace. Even if it's just one room, that is the work office. The rest of the house is non-work. And anything you do, even if you're talking about work, you do in that room. You do not pollute the rest of your house by work and having mounds of paper on the kitchen table or on the living room table, because it just, every time you look at it, you think and get wound up and frustrated. It's interfering with my home life. Okay, so try and keep them completely separate. And also, there comes a point, learn when you're able to actually switch that phone off and say, okay, it really doesn't matter, nothing is that important, the phone is going off at 9 tonight, it's not going on till 9 tomorrow morning, and that is our time. The world is not going to stop spinning if somebody rings us and gets an answer phone instead of me that night.
And that way you can at least sort of filter the calls, and if it is important, you can pick it up.
Absolutely.
But if it's not, you just ignore it.
Absolutely. And few calls, I have to say, few calls are that important.
The letter J, male or female, sir or madam, in Nottingham, thank you for your question. We want to know, are there any simple checks we can tick off when we get home to ensure we don't get caught up in the chores and the kids? We can't seem to squeeze it all in.
I think what you have to do, and I'm with you on this one, I've got the t-shirt, you know, life is so busy, you've got so much to do. What I tend to do is say, okay, for example, one evening a week, or Saturday morning a week, or a particular time in the week, that is the time my wife and I will blitz the house. Okay, that's the housework time. It's done, that's when you do it. And you know that's when it's going to be done, and so you can ignore the dust for the rest of the week. Okay, so you think, that's okay, that's the time we do it, the rest of the time is our time. And the other thing to say is, there are a lot of chores that we do that are actually non-essential. Okay, we do them because we do them, and we're used to doing them. Okay, and so use technology as best you can, and for things like that. You know, the number of people that still don't have dishwashers and things like that. If you can use them, use technology as best you can. But the rest of the time, if that floor doesn't get hoovered, if that dish doesn't get washed, it's not critical. Okay, in 20 years' time, nobody's going to remember that floor hasn't got hoovered. They are going to remember if mum and dad aren't together because they haven't been talking. Right.
Glad you mentioned mum and dad, because thank you, Jay of Nottingham, for that question. Lisa with a question. Lisa says, are our parents to blame? We're talking about mum and dad there. My parents were workaholics, says Lisa, and I think it may have rubbed off on me as well. I'm hardly ever at home with the kids. I'm so busy working to give them a better life that I'm not actually there to give them a better life. How about that? Yeah. How can I pass on better work management skills to my children so that they don't make the same mistakes that Lisa's done?
Well, to some extent, Lisa, and it might sound an odd thing to say, you're actually in a good position here because you've got the benchmark to compare yourself. You've seen what can happen by your parents being workaholic, so you know the pitfalls to avoid. I certainly do believe that you are often the product of both your genes and your environment, in other words, your parents, with the environment having the final say. And I find myself saying what my father said, 30 years ago, and thinking, duh, I'm actually saying it, I can't believe I'm saying that, and where's that come from? So you're probably got some influence from your parents there, but you know the damage that can cause, so you should be able to say, okay, I'm not going down that route, okay, I'm going to avoid everything like that they did, and in essence, do the exact opposite. Okay, so just look at what they did and then think to yourself, okay, what's the opposite of that? Can I do that? And you'll be surprised how much you can do. But you're not to blame for most of that. You are the product of your parents, but at the end of the day, you have the final say, not your parents.
Right. Thank you very much for your question. Fern, delighted for you, Fern. Not because of the first bit. Fern is 54, followed a messy divorce, and she's now become involved in a relationship with a lovely gentleman. It's been 6 months and going great. It's always that 6 month time when you get a little bit nervous about it, isn't it, Fern? Going great so far. I want to make sure I don't make the same mistakes I made the first time around. Have you got any relationship advice for those finding love the second time around?
I mean, first of all, congratulations, Fern. I'm delighted that you've sort of found love second time round. It is unfortunately a fact that people who have been divorced once are more likely to be divorced twice. So I wouldn't rush in to any kind of marital situation until you're feeling completely content and happy with things. But having said that, again, you've got some experience. You know what makes you tick, and also you know what you don't like in a relationship. Now, 6 months in relative terms is not a long time. I think the acid test is about 12 to 18 months. 6 months, if you sort of rush in and get married, you can still not know enough about that person that you're getting married to that you can get a nasty shock another 6 months later. So I would say is don't rush in yet for at least another 6 to 12 months. But if you get to the 18-month mark and you're still thinking, this is still nice, this man, loves me, I'm very comfy, he's comfy with me, you're probably okay to then dip your toe in the water and say, yep, second time round, this is fine. And why can't it be fine second time round? You can find your prince's second time round.
Someday my prince will come.
Absolutely.
Not me personally, you understand. Helen with a question. Helen, thank you for your question. Her partner recently became a freelancer, and that means that he would be able to spend more time together because he could choose his hours. But as I think we all know, the reality is when you're self-employed, you're the toughest employer there is on yourself. You work more hours. He won't take a day off now because he doesn't get holiday pay.
Yeah.
And so it's a loss of money every time. How does Helen convince her partner that it's crucial that they spend more time together and that there is more to life than working 7 days a week?
Tommy Cooper, the great comedian, used to be terrified of not working, and he worked himself to death because even at the peak of his powers, he genuinely believed that the next day all his work would go, even though all the evidence was completely against that. He could work to be 100 and it's to be making people laugh.
And guess what? I was the stooge. I used to work with him, so there you go. You didn't even know that.
Right, I'm touched by greatness.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I worked with Tommy Cooper 6 months, so I know what you're talking about. It's true.
Fantastic. I suppose the first thing to do here is actually be fairly artificial here, and that's sit down with your partner and actually look at how much money he thinks he needs and how much money you actually need. And I bet you my mortgage that the two are completely different. In other words, he is imagining he needs so much, but in reality, you need much less. So work out actually how much he needs to work before he feels that he is secure, because this is a question of security. This is not actually about you or your relationship. This is about a feeling of security and providing. And he's a fairly typical man. Okay, he feels nurturing, he wants to provide and not let it all go pear-shaped, which is great. But by the same token, you have to be able to say, okay, I've earned enough, now I'll have some fun time. I've earned that enjoyment, I'll go off and do it, and we can spend some time and some money together, and the world isn't going to fall. So just make that artificial accounting exercise work. Okay, look and see how much money you've got, how much you actually need, and I bet you find there's a difference.
Very quickly, we are running out of time, and you can yes or no to this, or thumbs up to this, or not, as the case may be. Richard and his wife, they work different hours, they both love their careers, but they do book one night a week where they shut the doors, sit down, it's their time, and he's saying perhaps other people who are emailing and texting in should perhaps try this one. Yes, good idea?
3 words. Yes, yes, yes.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Excellent, good. Glad we got that one sorted out. I know you've put a pile of top tips down. There's 7 of them that you put together that came out of this.
Yes.
Very briefly, can you just headline those for us and tell us where we can find them to look at them again?
They can all be found on the www.athomesociety.com. Right. And there's a whole range of tips, including things like change out of your work clothes when you come home. Okay?
Good idea.
Good idea. Make that clear blue water between the work and home. Ignore the dust. Don't have to hoover. Okay, relationships are better than hoovering. Okay, get that post-work routine. Get that gin and tonic. Whatever drink you want.
I'm reaching for it.
Absolutely. When you come home, know what your priorities are in life. Okay, make time for each other. Okay, realise that there are going to be times when you're not going to be able to sort of have that amount of quality time, such as children, but still make that 10 minutes. And also, prepare yourself for a long haul. It's not going to be solved in 10 minutes. Okay, this is for life. Okay, and you have to work at this. But if you really think your relationship is worth it, then it's worth the work, because the alternative isn't worth thinking about.
All right, damning figures that have come out from this report, really.
Absolutely.
Which was almost a terrible indictment on our work-related life and our relationships. Can we turn it all around?
We can. It's not too late to turn it around, but it's going to take work. And the first step in turning it around is actually putting your hand up and saying, I think I've got a problem.
Awful lot of talking to be done. There's been plenty of talking in the last half an hour. Thank you very much indeed for your questions on Web Chats, and thank you very much indeed to our GP, that's Dr. Roger Henderson, for coming in and joining us today. Hope you'll join us next time on Web Chats.